dear students and the other viewers. This is ETETA TV from Morogoro, Tanzania. My name is Madam Mkini, a history teacher. Today I'll be presenting to you the history questions appeared from the same topic in the Form 4 National Examination from 2018 to 2020. Those questions are from the topic of Africa in International Affairs. Starting with the paper of 2020, the question was set from the topic of Africa in International Affairs, as I introduced it before. The question was in number 9. It was learn as explain 6 reasons which facilitated the collapse of the first East African community in 1977. According to the nature of this question and according to the answer where they had to appear, the question has 3 parts. As we all know that the question needed to have the part of introduction. Then part 2, the question had to have the part of main body, and the last is conclusion. The candidates were required now to explain 6 reasons which facilitated the collapse of the East African community in 1977. As I said before, that the key point now of the question were the reason which facilitated the collapse of the first East African community in 1997. In answering the question, you should consider 3 parts, which are introduction, main body, and conclusion, as I introduced before. Introduction demands the students to define what is the East African community, periodization, whereby the first East African community was established in 1967 and collapsed in 1977, and the participants of this community were the Tanzanians, Kenyans, and Ugandans. The second part is the main body, whereby the candidates had to explain 6 reasons which facilitated the collapse of the first East African community. Point number 1, unequal development of members of the community. You can think that we have 3 members under this community, which are Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. And now, according to the nature of this point, that unequal development, those 3 countries, they never be the same in their development. They are quite different. You cannot compare the development they have, the Tanzanians, Kenya, and Uganda. So these were the reasons for them to collapse. The second point is lack of common currency. As we all know that all 3 countries, they are using different shillings. You cannot compare the shilling of Uganda with the shilling of Kenya. That's why it came a time that they had no any other choice than this East African community to collapse. Point number 3 is regional conflict. When we say regional conflict, under this we mean the conflict occurred between Tanzania and Uganda. It was between 1978 to 1979, whereby those conflicts, they fought over the regional boundaries. Point number 4 is about ideological differences. Ideological differences between those 3 countries, they differ. Tanzania and Uganda, they use the socialism, while in Kenya, they use the capitalism. Point number 5 was about the different level of economy among the member states. Their economy was not equal, since Tanzania, they had their own economy, which you cannot compare to the Kenya and Uganda. And point number 6 is about disunity among the member states. They were not well organized. Since they were not able to sit on the table together and discuss their objectives on how they can organize themselves, so it leads this community to collapse. The last part of the question is the conclusion, and the candidates had to wind up the reasons that made the former East African community to collapse and assess that still the members were in need to such community. As a result, in 2000, new East African community was formed by signing up the members from 5 different countries, which are Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan. Okay, this is the way whereby the students were supposed to answer this question by using this format. As I said, that introduction, main body, and conclusion had to appear. So by using these points and using those guidelines, as I said before, the students must be in a position of scoring high marks. The second question appeared from the same topic, which is Africa in International Affairs, appeared in the year of 2018. The question was set, as I said, the question was set from this topic, Africa in International Affairs. The question was number 9, which was read as, with the concrete examples, assess 6 problems facing the current East African community. As we described in our former presentation, the question was demanding the students to assess the problems which were facing the former East African community, and this question in this year demanded the students to assess the problems which were facing the new East African community. The key point of the question was the problems facing new East African community. This is where the question is, problems facing the new East African community. In answering such question, you should consider 3 parts, as we all know that 3 parts is very much important when answering the essay questions. And those parts are introduction, main body, and conclusion. Introduction of this question demands the candidates to define what is current East African community. What is current East African community? But periodization is very important when answering the question, and the participants as well. The new East African community is a regional grouping that comprises 6 members, which are Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan. This was formed in the year of 20,000 to date. The main body should assess the problems facing the new East African community. As we said that this new East African community were formed in 2000 up to date. So up to this time we are discussing this, we are still existing in this new East African community. Now let's see what are the problems facing this new East African community. Number 1 is about political instability. Political instability within the member states such as Burundi and Southern Sudan. They are still in civil wars in their countries, and still the member states are not in a position to solve those political instabilities among their member states. Point number 2 is about poor development of infrastructures. As we can see that all member states among this community has no good infrastructures to communicate themselves, and such infrastructures are like roads, railway, ports, harbors, as well as airports. Number 3 is about the lack of skilled qualified manpower. Under this point, we are talking about the skillful laborers which we can use among these member states. For example, here in Tanzania, we have so many different projects which are conducted within the country, but those skilled qualified manpower are coming from abroad and not within the member states of the community. Point number 5 is absence of common currency. This has been a problem since the former East African community had no common currency. Up to this moment, they are still having this problem. We are not in a position of getting the same currency which can be used among the member states. So this is a problem. Point number 6 is terrorism attacks and robbery. Under this point, we can cite an example from Kenya, whereby Kenya have been attacked by the Al-Shabaab. Several times they have been attacked by Al-Shabaab, but other members of the community discuss nothing about the attacks. Point number 6 is about the poverty due to insufficient funds to run different projects. Among the members of the community have no enough source of income to run those projects they have in their countries. As a result, they are asking loans from World Bank as well as IMF. The last part is the conclusion, whereby the candidate had to conclude by giving opinions on how new East African community should promote herself, since they were able to help various countries such as Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. Therefore, problems that emerged within the member states should be solved by members themselves. That some of the member states are able to solve the problems occurred in the different countries which are outside the community, but they are not in a position to solve the problems occurred within their member states. So the question had to be answered like that, whereby those 3 parts were very much important to be followed, as long as points to be explained, as I said. So by doing this, the students were in a position to score high marks. In 2019, the question was set from African in International Affairs topic. African countries have been suffering socially, economically, and politically as a result of being members of the United Nations. Explain 6 reasons to justify this statement. As I said, the question was number 9. It was read as African countries have been suffering socially, economically, and politically as a result of being members of the United Nations. Explain 6 reasons to justify this statement. In answering such question, you should consider 3 parts, as we all know that those 3 parts are very much important: introduction, main body, and conclusion as well. Starting up with the introduction, you should consider now the key point of the question, whereby under this question, the key point of the question is problems resulting from African participation in the United Nations Organization. The candidates required to define United Nations Organization as an international body and organization which was formed in 1945 after the end of the Second World War for the purpose of promoting and guarantee peace in the world, basically to support the independence of all nations in the world. Its headquarters is in New York City in the United States of America. And the main body of the question, whereby the candidate had to explain the problems resulting from African participation in the United Nations Organization. The first point says that it has made African dependent continent on foreign aid given by World Bank and International Monetary Funds. This means that African countries are still depending from the abroad. They are asking loans and other funds from World Bank and IMF. Point number 2, it has made African accept foreign market economy that devalues African products in the markets. Many African countries are still in a position of depending on the products which have been produced in abroad and not in Africa, within the African continent. And those products produced within the African continent have been devalued, and the United Nations said nothing about it. Point number 3, it has brought brain damage to Africans due to the Western education provided. We as Africans, we are using this Western education we adapted from Europeans. And the kind of education, it is more theoretically than practically. Point number 4, it has exposed Africa to multiple diseases that is hard to find cure. We as Africans, we have found ourselves that we are in a position of having so many diseases which have been exposed from abroad, and still there is no cure to those diseases. Examples of those diseases are such as HIV/AIDS as well as COVID-19. Point number 5, it has lowered the political sovereignty of African countries due to emergence of puppet leaders. We as African, we have found ourselves that most of us, if not all, we have our own independence, but our independence is only flag independence. Most of us found ourselves that we are in a new colonialism or neo-colonialism era. Point number 6, which must be the last point under this, it has not helped the Africans to solve their border conflicts. Some African countries are still suffering and fighting due to their borders. For example, the conflict happened between Tanzania and Uganda was over the Kagera region. The last part of the question is a conclusion, as we all know that when discussing those questions, you should have the conclusion. Under this conclusion now, the candidate had to conclude by summing up the positive contribution of the United Nations towards the Africans, such as maintenance of the world peace, promotion of human rights, and to make sure all African countries attained their independence. So we were discussing on the negativities of those United Nations, but also we have to state in our conclusion that United Nations has their positives towards their members. Thanks for listening to my presentation. You were with me, Madam Jane Mkini, a history teacher from Morogoro, Tanzania. Welcome again to my next presentation, and go on subscribing ETETA TV from Morogoro, Tanzania. Welcome again.